Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Carson City Airport Authority meeting for Wednesday, September the 21st, 2016 at 6 o'clock p.m. And we are meeting tonight here in the Sierra Room of the Carson City Community Center. To get us started, Tamara, if you'd please call the roll.
Chairperson Hutter.
Present.
Vice Chair Law. Here. Member Posick. Present. Member Shirk. Here. Member Stotts.
Here.
Member Torres.
Here.
Member White. Here. A quorum's present.
Thank you, Tamara. If you'd please join me and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, first order of business will be item C, approval of the minutes of past meetings, and we have before us the draft minutes for the meeting of Wednesday, August 17th, 2016. Is there anybody who has modifications, comments, or concerns regarding the August minutes? Seeing none or hearing none, I need a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Law.
Second.
Second by Member Posick. All in favor of approval? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. Excuse me. Item D, modification of the agenda. The Chair reserves the right to modify the agenda as necessary to most effectively process agenda items. Tonight, I am going to move agenda item number 4 to the position of item number 1, so that Melanie from the City HR office can get on her way tonight. Thanks for being here. And we'll make that public hearing number 1, and the other items will follow in sequence as published. Item E, public comment. Our first public comment period. Members of the public who wish to address the authority may speak on agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Limit your comments to 3 minutes per person or topic, please, and if it requires extended discussion, you can request the chair to calendar the matter for a future authority meeting. Do we have any public comment at this time? Hearing none, we'll move on to item F, our public hearings for tonight. As I mentioned, new item number 1, the published item number 4. For possible action, approval of an amendment to the interlocal cooperative agreement between the Airport Authority and the City of Carson City to permit use of the city's health, dental, vision, and life insurance program for authority employees. Determination on medical coverage to be elected and paid for by the authority, and an option for employees to include spousal and dependent coverage at employee expense, and potential authorization to council to present an amended interlocal agreement to the Board of Supervisors. And to present that, Member White, who has been leading this project.
So just to bring you up to speed, through the budget process, we identified a few items that we thought we could find some cost savings in, and indeed, we were able to find some pretty good savings by moving our employees from their current plan over to the city plan. So it's going to require modification of the interlocal agreement we have with Carson City. Council Takis has worked that out with the district attorney. We have Melanie Bruchetta here from Carson City Human Resources to answer any questions if there be any. But the real bottom line is that our current system that we use required us to budget $34,000. If we were to move over to the Carson City healthcare system, that's going to save us just about $18,700 a year in government speak. That's a 55% savings. So I think in keeping with The issues we identified during the budget system or budget building period, what our financial constraints are, I think it's imperative that we make this kind of move over to the city system. And with that, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Treasurer White and Vice Chair Law.
Maurice, can you tell us how the calculation on the savings was done? Because I can't come up with anything close to that.
Well, so we put $34,000 in the budget. And if you take what appears to be, if you look at this schedule that was in our final budget or final agenda, for the classified employee, our maximum cost would be $573.43 a month. Our maximum cost for the unclassified would be $580.18 a month. So if you take that just over $1,000 a month minus $34,000, we're in pretty good shape.
Okay, my concern with that is historically, at least so as I understand it for the last 5 years, the two employees that we have not only been covered for themselves, but also for their spouses. I have a very difficult time going back to only providing for them.
Well, I understand there's some uncomfortable feelings about that, but life is not static, the airport's not static, and we have some issues financially going forward, and I think we have to make some hard decisions about how we're going to address that. And this looks like a pretty big bullet. Change the policy and move forward.
I understand that. However, when you're talking about changing policy, I have yet to see written policies that underscore either the payment of the spousal premiums or no payment of the spousal premiums. I find it difficult to put ourselves in a position of where we have employees who have yet to appreciate or be gifted with any kind of a salary increase over the last 5 years, and then turn around and back out of their spousal payments. It just doesn't sit well with me.
Member Posick? Okay, Member Stotts.
Yeah, it sounds as if this is going to result in a net decrease in the benefits that are going to these two employees. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't make these guys, it's essentially the same as cutting their salary for the sake of helping the budget. Well, it's true that we need to have a nice, tidy budget, but we shouldn't be doing it on their backs.
Just doing a little quick math, just remembering, of course, that this is really not, there are a number of separate subparts, as the agenda item shows, one of which is an overall decision to amend the interlocal agreement with the goal of moving forward to a shift to the city health plan. A second decision within that is, does the authority cover spousal health insurance as well as employee health insurance? Doing a little bit of quick math, using the column on EE plus spouse, the total cost per year would be $27,150. So still, we're seeing about an $11,000 savings against staying with our current system. So if that helps anybody on the authority here, just from a math standpoint, with the first question of changing providers, then you get to the second question around changing benefits, if that makes sense. Vice Chairman Law.
I also understand that during the last 5 years, we have been reimbursing Manager Rowe for his wife carrying her own insurance or in a stipend of $239 a month. Has that been calculated into the savings? Because I understand if they go to this, one of our employees is on the HMO, the other one is on the point of service. And the other question I have regarding that is Gary actually a classified employee under the state program? Because he doesn't have, so far as I know, he doesn't have a classification related to his job. And I don't know the answer to that. But there are just some confusions there that I'm having trouble working through. And that's my question.
Maybe this is a place where either Council Takis or Melanie, is there clarification or assistance that could be provided in that question?
Well, I think Member Law actually hit a number of points, and one of which Mr. Rowe had advised me earlier this week. He's not on the HMO plan, he's on the point of service plan. So the 580 should not be compared to, I think it should be the 640.87, correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so I think that has to go into your calculation. But what you had said, Chairman, is essentially correct. There's actually two pieces here. One is whether you go forward to make the city plan available to the airport employees, and the second decision would be what you do in terms of spousal coverage, which are basically two things. And that could certainly be broken into two pieces, and maybe you don't even want to take action on one of them tonight. But if you want to put the plan, make this available to us, the city has asked that we have an interlocal agreement that states that, and that's what the interlocal agreement amendment is there for. And frankly, I don't have any of the underlying financial information. I've never been charged with that responsibility, and I've never been asked to look into that. All I've really been looking at are the legal requirements.
And I guess my question was very specifically toward one piece of this, which is the question of classification of employee. That's all I'm asking about right at the moment, but you bring up good points that, and I'll take the point of mentioning this, is we can modify the interlocal agreement, which gives us the option, but not the commitment. It's not the same thing as moving to this plan, but it gives us the option to do that. Part two is, do we go with this plan? Part three is, which coverages under this do we choose to support? So there's some pieces we got to step through here, and I think one of the fundamental ones is in understanding the value of moving to this plan and any of the options that are available to us is, are we clear on which of our two employees are eligible for which of these coverages? I think that's what Vice Chair Law was asking.
I haven't done the research to find out if Gary is technically classified or not. I mean, which category he fits in. I would note that I don't know that that's a big deal because the numbers are all within $6 or $7 of each other. So the numbers are relatively small, but it is definitely something we would want to find out before we go to that level.
Thanks. Treasurer White.
And so what I presented was what our possible maximum savings not be. Not that we're locked in to that particular column of benefits. And indeed, if you look at over on the point of service side, it says there the city cost for just the employee is $580, the same as over on the employee-only side of the HMO. And likewise, if you add the spouse in, then it's up about another $300 a month, but still a pretty substantial savings over what we're doing now. I did find in all the paperwork for employee classifications for the city, unclassified employees are those employees of the city who are not hourly, temporary, or not otherwise represented by a bargaining unit. So our people don't work for the city, so that last part I don't think would add in there. So I guess if Gary is not hourly and not temporary, then for our purposes, perhaps he is unclassified, which would move him into that row where I had inserted Tim's name. My experience when I was employed with the government, The bosses who received a little better life insurance, a little better vacation, they were unclassified. I was salaried my entire time there. I was never unclassified, but I didn't receive those extra benefits of being a boss. That's the key difference. Are you a boss or are you not a boss? My understanding when I was a government employee.
I know Gary is not with us tonight.
No, he's there.
Oh, okay. Oh, you are. Sorry, Gary is with us tonight. I guess there's a question that goes to Tim and to Gary with regard to the benefits that you currently receive, because I think as was mentioned, Tim, your current coverage under our current benefits plan is a POS, not that kind of POS, but a POS type of plan versus an HMO type of plan. And I think that really describes more than anything the nature of the network. Have you had a chance to become familiar with how, either of you, how this plan, either of the two plans under the city package compares with regard to coverages, deductibles, et cetera, et cetera?
The coverages for point of service and HMO, Gary and I have talked about at length, and our understanding is between public employees' benefits and the city, there's really not that much difference, including deductibles.
Between the two options here, HMO and POS, or between either of these and where you are now?
Either of these and where we are now.
So these we could consider the city of Carson City plans that are available to be more or less equivalent in terms of the level of service and the level of disruption in regard to the benefit you receive.
Well, I can't speak for service, but I can speak for the coverages, is that they're similar.
Great. One more question that I have is, it's important to note, and I want to go back to the numbers that have been mentioned here. Currently, and I'll start with Tim's case, we provide as a benefit to Tim a dollar amount that you said was in the order of $200 and something a month.
Something 240, 239.
It's $239 and change a month, and that's to reimburse my wife for her retirement, which she is under public employees benefits. Mm-hmm. And we did that in order to save the airport money. If she was to go on my plan, it would have been double or more than double what we were paying now.
Okay, and you can see where I'm going here, which is if you look at the EE plus spouse, it's about, well, it's more than double that. You know, let's say employee alone $634, employee plus spouse $1,200. So it's about a $600, it's like almost, it's basically double. And if we move to employee only under this new plan and continued to provide that stipend, I mean, there's nothing about moving to this plan that changes your ability to get her coverage through the mechanism we're using now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and is that the same for you, Gary? Is there anything about, because your scenario may be a little different, in how we are providing the benefit overall, is there anything about switching to the city plan that would change our ability to provide spousal coverage for your wife under the way we're currently doing it?
Currently, my wife has no other insurance other than through the airport. When she was a active teacher, she retired. When she was an active teacher, she had her own insurance. The airport did not provide any insurance coverage for her. So in those 5 years, it saved the airport a considerable amount of money for not having to cover her, because I had the option. I could have covered her also. 2 is, like I say, if it were to go to an employee-only benefit, I would essentially take a pay cut, a considerable pay cut, probably like 18% is what it would cost me an hourly wage. I haven't had a raise in 5 years. I had one raise from Manager Rowe when Chairman Norvell was chairman. And since then, it has been the opinion of board members, no individual here, I'm going to not point any fingers, but they have resisted any effort to give us some kind of increase. I don't look at it as being gift. Over the years, our wages have actually fallen in real buying power. The airport has even received increases from whatever it's called, through cost of
CPI adjustments on the leases.
Right, right. The words escaped me. Because of adjustments, we haven't had that benefit. We have not had, even though my understanding through NRS 844, the authority is charged with providing those benefits to us. We haven't received any of them. Today, Mr. Chairman, you and the board are considering reducing our benefit. Not because we're doing bad work, not because the money isn't in the budget for us, it has been budgeted, but because it is considered by some to make it, to use us as a way to save a few bucks. There have been areas where a great deal of money have been expended by this authority, and they've not received any real challenge by members of this authority. I question the intentions here. It's nice to wave the dollar sign and say we're going to save some money, but I question the motivation behind it. So those are my words. But I will say again, to put my spouse as a cost to me on this is a direct hardship to me. You know, that's all I can say about it.
Well, thank you very much for sharing those important comments and perspectives, and that was more than what I had hoped to get, and I'm glad you took the opportunity to share that, and I appreciate that. I want to ask the question again, though, to clarify, and I'll ask Tim since Gary sat down. What are we currently doing, the mechanism, refresh us, the mechanism we're currently using to actually provide that coverage to Gary's spouse? We are doing it as basically an EE plus spouse under our current plan, as opposed to a stipend to buy coverage like we're doing in your case. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Gary his option was the HMO, and he is equivalent to the EE plus spouse under public employees benefits.
Thank you. And Treasurer White, what is the premium over EE only that we currently pay in Gary's case?
Specifically in Gary's case, I don't know. I've worked strictly off what we have had budgeted as an overall.
Tim, do you know the answer to that?
I looked at it today. It seems like it's right around $800 a month.
As an additional cost?
That covers Gary under the HMO.
But I'm saying, do you know what the split is between employee only and employee plus spouse under our current plan?
No, I don't know that offhand.
Okay, thanks. Vice Chairman Law.
I actually do know that, or at least very close to it.
Great.
Gary's coverage through the HMO with he and his wife is a total of $1,573.72. Approximately $850 of that is for him individually as the employee, and the balance of it is for his spouse. At least that's what I've been told. That's monthly.
Okay, thank you very,
Total premium is $1573.72.
great.
And I have one other comment, if you wouldn't mind, on the date that's on the addendum to the cooperative agreement, the first addendum to the cooperative agreement. There was some question about why May 17th, 2020 was in there as a renegotiated date or whatever it is. It's right here. This date here. I was wondering why it was May 17th, 2020. Seemed like a very short-term time for an adjustment. That is the result of us creating the first agreement with the city on May 17th, 1990, and it was a 30-year agreement. So that's why the odd date. It wouldn't make any difference whether we took advantage of this addendum or not. On that date, the addendum is up for renegotiation, so thank you.
Thank you for researching that as well, and thank you for that data. And I just want to, I'll take the opportunity to sort of, for the authority, compile what we've just heard. In line with the overall savings number that I mentioned to you when I did some quick math, to recap, $27,000-ish versus $38,000 if we were in both cases EE plus spouse. In Gary's case, we're currently paying $1,573 to provide the equivalent benefit under the city plan, $1,100. So a savings of, actually, it's about $450 a month right there. In the case of Tim's scenario, it would actually be the $640 under the EE plus the $238, I believe it was. So my point being is we do see a opportunity to keep benefits equivalent and save a considerable amount of money by moving to the city plan. So other questions, I feel like we've done a lot of the talking here. Questions about either one, the interlocal agreement itself or the amendment itself, two, about the idea of moving to the Carson City coverage plan, and then three, the potentially the ability to the option that would be chosen. Was that a flick? Yes. Okay. Member Shirk.
And the question, if I may ask, in Tim's case, we're reimbursing his wife's health plan. Is that going to be how we're going to go through the city by doing that? Are we going to continue that, or is she just going to go on the city plan?
Well, it sounds like the best value is to, if there's no prohibition in doing it from, that's why I asked the question, the best value would be to basically parallel what we're doing right now, which is employee-only coverage for Mr. Rowe and a stipend for Mrs. Rowe.
But how does that, if we do Tim employee only, are we going to reimburse him, or to cover his wife's insurance? How does that work?
Well, no, right now we are buying Mr. Rowe's coverage and reimbursing him for his wife's. We would do the same thing under the city.
Okay, that's all I want to clarify. Okay. And then in Gary's case, we're going to have, he will be covered and his wife will be covered, correct? Under the city employee, correct?
That is correct. I mean, that is what the equivalent coverage option would be.
And can we ask both the gentlemen who are in their coverage, are they okay with that coverage? Are you okay with this? If Gary come back to the podium, is this coverage going to be okay from what you have compared now?
I've looked at the overall plan. It's difficult to know if my doctor is able to participate in this plan. I haven't talked to him about it because I don't have that information to give him. As far as coverages, the city plan has comparable visit coverage, your copay for visits, specialists and whatever. If I go with their HMO's program, and you have to stay within their program, obviously. So the coverages are very comparable. They're not exactly comparable, but they're not exactly the same, but they're reasonably comparable. So my largest concern at this point, right at this point, is what it would cost me. If it's going to cost me, you know, and that's what it boils down to all of us. What is this costing us? And Manager Rowe and I we were both very aware of the limited resources of the airport. We do not operate in a vacuum. We understand what it takes to maintain the airport and operate it, both in the managerial side and out there taking care of the physical facility. So it isn't like we're blind to what the questions you're asking, as is Member White has brought up this item. And so, judging by what Chairman Hutter has said, the cost savings of maybe $400 or $500 a month is, you know, we're talking maybe $6,000, $7,000 a year, and that's what we're talking about. How much do we want to upset the apple cart? How much do we want to change things for maybe $6,000 or $7,000? I have seen this board expend a great deal of money on projects on the airport, and I'm not going to say whether they're good or bad, but they've expended large amounts of money. And the consideration I think that has been taken in this item is probably greater than was taken in those. So that's just from my point of view. And so that's my thought.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I think we hear you loud and clear that, yes, our employees are concerned about the possibility that we'll have what is in effect a reduction of compensation through a change in benefits. And I don't think there's anybody here who doesn't hear that loud and clear and who does not take that reality very seriously. So, you know, again, I appreciate your reinforcing that point. To bring it back to the question, do you feel you have enough information at this time to answer Member Shirk's question about, for example, disruption? When we do health insurance benefits purchasing and evaluation at my company, one of the things we look at very closely is what's called a disruption report. And we look at any shift of network, and we look across all 425 employees, and we say, who's going to have to change their primary care provider? Who's going to have to change a specialist? And we look for that, and we try to minimize that as part of the consideration. So we've got, fortunately, a simpler project here where we have 2 employees. But do you know yet, it sounded to me like you didn't, whether switching to this plan would drive a change in your provider? Is that correct? Or do you have the information you need yet to answer that question?
Gary, Gary and I have talked about this also extensively, and neither one of us know if we're going to be able to keep our own doctors. We just don't know. And this would be something that we could only find out through the city human resources.
And Melanie, is this something that if our folks were to come to your office, you could assist them with understanding what the in-network, out-of-network provider map looks like compared to the program we're currently on?
Melanie Bruchetta, Carson City Human Resources Director. The answer to that question is yes. We would schedule a meeting with them to also meet with Prominence, and they would go over all the differences in the benefits that Prominence provides. They wouldn't be able to speak to the differences in benefits between PEB and Prominence, though.
Well, Ms. Burkett, and thank you for that, is up. Do any authority members have questions for her as well? And Member Posick, I know your light's on. I don't know if that's for Gary, for everyone, for her, for...
There was a
Okay.
question for the board.
Okay, we'll
do have a question.
come back to that, and Member Stotts first.
I have a general question, and this might be kind of difficult for you to answer, but if we go with the city and we save $11,000 according to Morris, or $7,000 according to Gary, will it be possible to restore the benefits that they lost with that $7,000 savings? And if so, am I...
You mean if we were to switch and
Yes.
remove spousal benefits?
Yes.
Two different questions.
Okay. I guess what the simplest way to put this is it possible to keep them whole without going backwards in their total benefits?
Carson City can only provide the benefits that were contracted with Prominence, and I have to caution this board that every year our insurance provider can change and the benefit levels can also change. We're on a fiscal year, so it's July 1st to June 30th. In addition to that, I need to mention, and this is going to be a little bit off the question that you just asked me, but that we will probably be incurring broker's fees that we will pass those fees on to you as well. We have an RFP out for an insurance broker at this time. I don't know how much the cost of that broker will be. It could be anywhere up to $60,000 a year, which would be approximately $100 a year more per employee if you were to go with the city plan. And that's just a guess. Like I said, the RFP is on the street right now. We don't have a current broker because we've had a pricing agreement with St. Mary's for a number of years, so we haven't needed one. The other thing I wanted to answer is the classified versus unclassified. The only reason that's material to you at this point is because our classified employees only receive $20,000 in life insurance, and our unclassified employees receive $35,000 in life insurance. So if you look on the sheet that was provided, that's the only difference in the premium. It's the cost for the life insurance. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the city would also like language inserted into the interlocal agreement, if you were to approve it, that the airport authority is responsible for complying with any federal or state reporting requirements. The reason I bring that up is because Prominence has indicated to us that under the Affordable Care Act, they are required to report all of the employees that are that have coverage under the city to the federal government. We, in turn, take the information from our payroll system, and your employees will not be in our payroll system, and we file a report with the federal government as well. They may try to match those two reports and find that we have two employees that aren't on our payroll system that are being covered by Prominence. If that were to happen, they've just advised that you could be facing an audit. I can't tell you what that means. The city isn't concerned about it, but that doesn't mean that the authority may not have concerns.
Okay, let me just summarize my understanding of it. So first of all, the airport would be responsible for approximately $2,400 a year in brokerage fees. That's assuming $100.
$200 a year.
Correct.
Is that a year or is that a month?
That's a year, and that is
okay.
purely an assumption. Like I said, the RFP is out on the street. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking that $60,000 a year is a significant chunk of change for a broker, but we haven't had one, so I don't know if that's a realistic number or not.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought it was going to be $100 a month for each of them, and that would be a big piece of change. The second, I just wanted to say, make sure I understand this also. There's a possibility that we might trigger an audit of our budget if we go ahead and have those two guys.
I don't think it would be your budget. I would think it would be the health insurance benefits that you provide to your employees. But my understanding, and don't quote me because I'm not an ACA expert, and you would need to find a lawyer that could give you that information, is that you don't have to comply with the ACA simply because you only have 2 employees. But again, I'm not an ACA expert, and so I can't tell you if that's true or not. The city does have to comply, and that's why we have to report.
Okay, Vice Chair Law.
I have one question for you. Can you give us an estimate? You're talking about annual increases or periodic increases in your health insurance premiums over the past few years. Can you give us any idea of what degree those increases have impacted your employees?
Well, the city pays 100% for employee coverage and a percentage depending on which labor agreement the employee's position is covered under for dependent coverage. We've seen increases, I think it's been 8% or less. Last year, we didn't have an increase except for a 1.75% increase in dental. But again, I can't promise that we will stay with prominence effective July 1st of next year. After we hire our insurance broker, we will issue an RFP for insurance for premium or for insurance services.
Okay, and my second question for you is there a classification category in state service for jobs similar to that is done by Gary in a maintenance position?
I am not an expert on state HR laws. I work for a local government entity, which is completely separate. As I stated earlier, the difference for Carson City between a classified employee and an unclassified employee is simply how they are listed, whether they are FLSA exempt or FLSA non-exempt. In my professional opinion as an HR director, if Gary does maintenance for the airport authority, he would be FLSA non-exempt and would be entitled to receive overtime. So he would be considered under Carson City, if it were a Carson City position, as a classified position.
Okay, but my question is, does Carson City have a classification schedule itself? Class 28, class 14, whatever?
No.
Okay, so each individual job is assessed specifically on that criteria alone, and that determines whether they're classified or unclassified?
That's correct.
Not according to a list? Okay.
No.
Okay. Any other questions for Melanie? Okay, Member Torres.
The reporting aspect of that, is that not just to show that they have health insurance?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay.
And that it's affordable.
Member Posick. Thank you, Mr. Kedem.
It wasn't for you.
Okay.
I have one.
My question is, it looks to me like the Board of Supervisors has to approve this agreement, whether we do it tonight or not. So let's just leave the employees and their options out of this for now until we can come up with better answers for what these employees really have or want or change from the city. That's the only thing that I brought up.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion at this time that we approve the amendment to the interlocal cooperative agreement between the Airport Authority and Carson City, including the request from Ms. Burketta and the city, on behalf of the city, and to authorize Mr. Council Takis to present that to the Board of Supervisors for their approval.
Second.
Okay, so a second from Member Law, and questions from the authority on that specific piece of the subject. Treasurer White.
So there seems to be a little fear about maybe the city changing providers. You know, I've been with PEBS now since 2005, and my doctors have changed, my coverage has changed. I was charged with the responsibility to find some savings in our budget, and I've done that. And I bring this information to this board. What you do with it is what you do with it. We had to have an agenda item with possible action, and so that's what was constructed. It wasn't necessarily that I've insisted that we do anything, but we had to have an agenda item constructed in a manner that allowed us to do whatever we decided to do tonight. So I brought these savings. To suggest that there's some ulterior motive besides finding savings is ridiculous and out of line. That's the bottom line, is savings. What happens with the information I've provided is up to everybody up here. So if you're going to question motive, question everybody.
Okay, if I may, I didn't.
Member Shirk.
I'm sorry. I just want to get clear on the motion again. I'm sorry. So what is the, maybe if you could break it down a little bit for me, if you don't mind.
And yes, I could ask tomorrow, but I'm just trying to quote actually how it's written here. So my motion is that we consider the matter of approval of the amendment to the interlocal cooperative agreement between the Airport Authority and Carson City, as amended there, and present that to the Board of Supervisors for their approval. What this does is establish the framework, and I think Member Posick made a very good point, that it opens the door, okay? Once the supervisors approve, if we approve this tentatively and they approve this, then it says that going to this plan is even an option, okay? Let alone what piece of this plan we do or we do not pick. So I just wanted to start moving us down the road tonight. And so that first motion, the intent is, let's consider the business of the amendment to the interlocal agreement that would even open the door to this option.
And that is in respect, bear with me if you will. So we're going to ask the Board of Supervisors to approve this, and that would be that the two employees here at the airport would then move forward into the healthcare.
Nope, that the two employees at the airport could move into the plan if this authority chose to make that decision tonight or at some other time.
Okay, so this is just opening the door to the possibility of taking advantage, that's the wrong word, taking advantage of, utilizing, thank you, utilizing the health care of Carson City versus what they have now, at a cost to the employees, or at a, would they be, or is that a different agenda item?
Different item.
Different agenda item.
Different motion.
Different motion.
Yeah.
So this only opens the door to look at the possibilities of what we can and cannot do, correct? With health care for the two employees.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Member Posick.
It pretty much was answered by you two.
And before I then go to public comment on that motion, I would actually take the opportunity to say, looking down the street of this agenda item, my personal view is that from what our good employees have said to us tonight, that that meeting with Ms. Burketta's office, and thank you for the offer to walk them and have your team walk them through this, to understand and be able to come back to us with that answer about what sort of disruption, what sort of comparables in your real benefit would moving to this plan, and what coverage, or sorry, what network, what providers you'd be able to access or not access that you could have now. I think that's a very important part of this decision. So, you know, I think that's information, if we were to decide here to modify the agreement to open the door to this, my personal view is that that's information we would want to know before we took further steps about moving to this plan, if that makes sense. Member Shard.
And if I may, would it not be in the best interest of all parties to get that information before we move forward with this motion? Let them go talk and see if this can all be worked out, rather than make this motion, move forward, and then they go talk, and then we say, no, we don't want to do it?
Here's my answer to that, and it's a good question, Member Shard. We know how these things go. If this could end up being a real slam dunk, okay, we could find out in, a couple weeks' time. Remember, we don't have to actually wait for the next authority meeting per se, although to take action we would. But in a month's time, we could find out, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, say our employees. We want to turn on the savings, says the authority right now, and now we're 1 month closer to that option, having moved this interlocal modification through the soups. There's no harm in doing it and keeping this option open. I mean, we may find actually that through some things that we learn, goodness, we don't want to do this right now. But then Ms. Bruchetta comes back in July of next year and says, look at what we've negotiated under our new agreement. And we go, wow, that's awesome. We can start doing that right now. See where I'm going? So I think that establishing this option through the modification of the interlocal is prudent and keeps things moving. Member Stotts? I'm counting from,
Switch some.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to try to simplify this, at least in my mind. So basically, what your motion is to ask the Board of Supervisors to give us permission to go further with this. Okay.
Vice Chairman Law.
The other thing that we could consider, as you're talking about negotiating a new scheme next year for your health insurance coverage and it going out for bid, at the same time, the legislature will be meeting, and there's no guarantee that they won't change PEBP's criteria as well, and maybe by July of next year, not saying that we wouldn't trade before then, but we may find down the road that the premium structure that comes from your public offering will be firmed up at that time, and we have the option then, if the state plan changes, to compare the two and move forward at that time if we haven't done so before then.
Very good point, and I'll just add the note as I go over to Treasurer White. There's nothing about the city's plan, the state's plan, the Click Bond plan, any of our other plans that is more or less stable than any others when it comes to this repricing. We're all out there, as I know you know, Ms. Bruchetta, trying to get the best value for the employees, keep benefits stable while containing costs, keep costs stable while doing our best. And there's nothing unique to your plan in the city in that regard. Treasurer White.
So, yeah, we've had testimony tonight by Gary and Tim that they feel like the plans are essentially the same. The real question is whether they can keep their doctors or not. There is a question about what will the plan be in the next cycle through, and I think we'll probably know that in May, because is that not when your open enrollment period is as well? Same as PEB?
We like to have the answer typically in March or April due to the fact that we have to file a tentative budget with the state. So
Right.
we have that usually solidified no later than the end of April.
So we're not going to have a whole lot of savings if we were to trigger it tonight anyway, which we're not inclined to. So I just bring these things up just to kind of set the pegs up as to how it's really, what the reality of the situation is. So that's it.
Vice Chair Law.
One last question. Ms. Bruchetta, how do you pronounce your name for real? I've heard several
My
different.
first name or my last name?
Your last name.
It's Bruchetta.
Bruchetta. Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Bruchetta, is there a provision or is there a concern about transferring employees from PEBP to the city's plan if there are pre-existing conditions? And subsequently, what period of time does it take to make that transfer? Two separate questions.
Okay, I can't answer any questions relating to your agreement with PEB. I don't know if there's a time period, a notice period, anything like that that you need to give PEB in order to leave their program. As for pre-existing conditions, that would be something that I would want the employees to discuss with Prominence. I'm unaware of any pre-existing condition clauses in our agreement with Prominence, but again, they would find that out before you guys would formally move over to the city.
Okay, but if they come over to Prominence from PEBP, regardless of how long, what kind of notice we need to give to PEBP, if we pay their first premium, let's say in November, when do their benefits begin? Immediately, or is there a delayed period?
Their benefits would begin November 1st if we were to receive the payment no later than November 10th.
Thank you.
Treasurer White.
So through all of the PEB materials that I've been through, would be nice if I could talk to a human being at PEBs. I didn't find anywhere that there's a penalty. I didn't find anywhere that we're restricted as to when we leave. However, it may be much easier to leave during the open enrollment period for everybody involved. So again, I probably should have brought that up earlier, but at any rate.
Okay, at this time, do we have any public comment on the motion currently on the floor? Okay, coming back to the authority, any further questions or comments? At that time, I'd call for the vote on the motion to approve amendment to the interlocal cooperative agreement and referral of it to the Board of Supervisors. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, if there be any? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. And Council Takis, do you have a chance to talk to Ms. Burkett about the language?
Yes, she's given me that amendment language. It's the same clause that she read aloud on the record, and so I will work with her tomorrow to make sure that's included.
Great, thank you very much. And if you would then move it forward to the supervisors, that would be fantastic. Okay, so with that out of the way, I think unless someone feels otherwise, there is no appetite to go further without other information. I don't hear any other scrambling for a motion on this agenda item. Is that correct? Okay. So that's where we'll leave it for tonight. And thank you guys very much. What I would ask is that to help us move forward on this is if you could, and I guess, Tim, if you could take the lead in working with Ms. Burketta's office to find out how to schedule the appointment for yourself and Gary to look at that disruption information.
She just gave me a couple of packets, one for each, and we will both schedule a time where we can go down and meet with Prominence.
Great, thank you for that. I think that's going to be really critical information going forward. Treasurer White.
Be sure to look into which classification you guys fit into, classified or unclassified. I think that was the only other kind of question that was out there.
Okay, I can go, I'd probably have to go to the state, but through all the questions that I've asked leading up to this meeting and getting information, because of the nature of the airport authority, falling under basically Nevada Revised Statutes 844, we do not belong to Carson City. We do not belong to the state. So therefore, talking to the president of the Carson City Employees Association, which is their bargaining unit, talking to Melanie and others, we are considered unclassified employees. And what that means exactly is who knows. We're just kind of hybrids. So I don't know. I've tried to get a solid answer. It's nearly impossible to get somebody with a solid an opinion.
Okay.
Somebody's redheaded stepchild.
We'll move to item number 2 on the modified agenda for possible action, election of a chairman and vice chairman of the Airport Authority per NRS 844 Section 6. This being my last meeting as an authority member in this term, as it is Mr. Posick's. That means that I will not be able to continue to hold the role of chairman anytime in the next 4 years. So what I would do is call for an opening of nominations for the position of chair or chairman, I think as it officially is, and I would open that by nominating our vice chair, Linda Law.
We're going to do it one at a time? Okay.
Do we have any other nominations for the role of chair? Member Shirk, is there a second on a nomination? Is that how that works? Okay. Okay, good. I know it's not really like a motion, so. If there are no other nominations, do we have any public comment on that nomination? Hearing none, all in favor of Member Law as the chairman of the Airport Authority? Aye?
Aye.
All opposed, if there be any? Hearing none, congratulations, Linda, the next chairman of the Carson City Airport Authority, or chair of the. Next, nominations for the role of vice chair of the authority.
I nominate Phil Stotts for the vice chair position.
Okay, we have nomination of Member Stotts.
Second.
A second by Member Shirk. Do we have any other nominations for the role of vice chair? Hearing none, public comment on Member Stotts' nomination. We'll call for the vote. All in favor of Phil Stotts as the vice chairman of the Airport Authority? Aye?
Aye.
All opposed, if there be any? Hearing none, congratulations, Phil, the next vice chair of the Airport Authority. Now, I think these become effective at the conclusion of this meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not racing off anywhere. I just wanted to make sure, looking at council, take us that we aren't doing anything wrong. Bringing us to item number 3, for possible action, authorization of investigation of remedies for low-flying aircraft noise and safety concerns due to aircraft flying low over the Apollo Lane area adjacent to the airport, potential remedial action against offending pilots, and identification of other possible solutions. Mr. Glade Myler.
Yes.
And if you would sign in on our log and state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Glade Myler. That's Glademyler. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Members of the committee, we appreciate this opportunity. We had others who were going to come, but they couldn't make it this time. They were here last time. The biggest concern I have, are we just going over this again and again and again? If you recall, in 2006, there was that plane that came down in our neighborhood, and things haven't changed since then. Even though in the newspaper, I'm reading from 2006, July 19th, it says, on the safety issue, there's little that can be guaranteed, but a major part of the overall solution is in the $25 million scheduled to be spent on the airport to realign the runway away from homes on Apollo Drive. Another part will entail making sure the pilots abide by rules and respect nearby residents. To do that, the Airport Authority will work with pilots to enforce responsible flight procedures. Residents, in turn, are being asked to report aircraft taking part in behaviors that may be risky or cause unnecessary noise, such as flying too low. Now, we haven't had too much problem with the noise because we're used to the noise, but it's the safety of our neighborhoods, and that's why we're here. I think all of you have a copy of what I submitted to Mr. Takis. I listed the number of different sightings, I call them sightings, that went over a house, particularly the one on June 3rd, 2016, where they apparently were trying to practice an emergency approach. I don't know what the thing was, but they almost clipped the telephone poles in the trees. Now, I have to take an opposite approach than Mr. Takis when he's saying that, oh, well, it's difficult to determine how far they were above. I mean, the trained eye of a person on the ground can tell how far they are up there by what else is around there. And that plane almost clipped the telephone poles. And it sounded like the motor was off. So we thought they were going to crash when we turned that corner. Now, since that time, there have been another sightings. Yesterday, I was out there watering my garden. Look up, and there goes this plane with the blue stripes on its wings, white with blue stripes. That one has done this a number of times. There's one plane that's totally white, does it a number of times. There's another plane that's white that has red striping on the sides that has done it a number of times. It's almost as if it's in your face because we have brought this issue before you. And it's getting rather frustrating. Now, we cannot see that number. If you're standing on the west side of my property, the number's on the other area, so you can't see it, and vice versa. And besides, they're going over and at certain angles, it's very difficult to see one. I've seen one, and that was an N1701, I think was the number, and that was during the time that the training was being done for pilots. And at the one meeting I attended a long time ago, they promised that they would change that with the training. And after we did that, there wasn't a problem with that plane. But these others, particularly one plane that's all yellow, he just does whatever he wants. And it's really frustrating. Talking to Mr. Rowe, when we went there to complain about this, on the phone after he called me back, we went right to the airport authority, and he was not even there. So we had to write on the little whiteboard our phone number and our names so that he could call us. Now, I don't know what your security is there. I mean, I have to understand that he probably can't be in that area all the time. But he called me back later and was explaining we're trying to change the situation. But it just seems like it just keeps recurring. Now, I have a letter that I'm going to submit to you in the record. And this is from Dottie Kelly, who could not be here tonight. On that occasion in 2006, that plane damaged part of her property, her mailbox, broke a window, and I can't remember what all else, but, well, she says here, destroying our fence, mailbox, planter, and greenery. I was sitting 15 feet from the site. I'm going to read this letter. Unfortunately, I'm unable to be present at your meeting. However, may I offer this brief statement regarding the safety issues that seem to be starting again. Please know that it's not always possible to discern the number on the plane, nor a description of it. And without a pad and pencil at all times, well, memories may not remain clear, and for they are to where they are. The bottom line remains that the airport authority has no jurisdiction over aircraft in the air, only the FAA. But I question that also. I mean, who does? If you guys can't control it, who's going to control it? Because the FAA throws it back on you.
That's
Are we going
actually
in
not
circles?
correct, but please go ahead.
Cannot the FAA initiate action? Cannot not grant the CCAA the right to establish and strictly enforce such guidelines?
Is that a rhetorical question, or is that a question to me as chair?
Well, she wrote that.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right. This is the letter.
There's got to be, something's got to be done. Mr. Rowe indicated there's some rogue pilots. Don't even use their radios.
Which is in no way required by FAA regulations.
Well, how are you going to know who's coming in?
It's not required by FAA regulations. It's certainly best practice. And, but the airplane doesn't even have to have an electrical system. But I don't want to interrupt your comments.
I understand that we're going in circles. It stops for a while, and then they start doing it again. Do they understand when they come into this airport that there are some rules they need to follow? Here's your plan, and they don't follow it.
Would you
I
like
don't
feedback on this? I mean, we'll take these questions as they come. And stop me if this is, quote, going in circles. But if you feel like we're going in circles, it's because we're restating the facts. The facts are, and this is irrespective of the concern, and please hear this for what it is. And I'm not the only one to speak here, but we understand your concern and your upset over this. That is not the same thing as what we can and can't do about it. So we've got matters of regulation. You're going to hear some things here tonight about what the Carson City Airport Authority has directed its staff, and their staff is doing within what we can do to help the situation. We'll get to that. But with reference to things like the traffic pattern, that's advisory. Most people would probably never see that diagram. Okay, it's advisory in any case. This is an uncontrolled airfield in Class Golf airspace. The use of a radio or no use of a radio, for the extent to which that does or doesn't impact this conversation, is not required. Those airplanes don't even have to have an electrical system on board to operate at this airport. There is no jurisdiction. There's no jurisdiction that anyone in this room has. Excuse me a second. There's no jurisdiction that anyone in this room has over any of those aircraft while they are in the air and not operating on the ground at this airport. We all in this room have the ability to potentially trigger enforcement action or investigation of specific aircraft if they're identified. You can pick up the phone and call the FSDO in Reno and report November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not a real airplane that we're talking about, is doing such and such, and I have a concern. We can and do that as individuals as well. But it's really important to establish, and Council Takis can correct me if I'm getting in any way off base, that the jurisdiction over aircraft operating in the air at the end of the day is that of the FAA.
But we have no FAA tower here.
That's correct.
So how do they know whether there's another plane coming? They just come in?
See and avoid. It's the obligation of the pilot in command.
That doesn't make me feel very happy.
Well, it may not, but those are the facts. That's the reality. Council Takis.
Add that everything you stated about the law is correct, Chairman Hutter. The airport has been operated that ever since it's been an airport. And for many years, none of the airplanes had radios, and none of the airplanes had electrical systems. And we still have many of those airplanes on the field. Fortunately, most of them are kind of in museum status, and they're not flown. But some of the very light, ultralight airplanes don't have electrical systems, and so they have to have a handheld radio if they want to have a radio. Those aren't requirements by the FAA that they have a radio. And the requirements to us as a public airport is we have to allow any aircraft that are legitimately in the air to utilize our airport. Now, having said all that, if you have concerns about the flight characteristics of airplanes, the correct people to call are the FAA in the Reno office. That would be the correct people to call. I think that one of the reasons that we're trying to help you here is because if to the extent that we can do something through education of the pilots, in asking them in a nice way, please don't do that over the houses. We like our neighbors. We'd like our neighbors to like us. That's what we want to do. And I kind of suspect that what's happened here is we have those chats with the pilots, and then the pilot community changes a little bit or memories go away, and then the problem pops back up. So I think it's healthy for you to come and tell us when you're starting to see a recurrence of it, because that allows the airport manager to go talk to the flight schools and say, hey, look, guys, don't be practicing engine out over the houses. You're scaring the people. Even though we can't force them to stop, they should have the same interest that we have, which is we want our neighbors to be happy with us, just as our neighbors want to be happy, have us be happy with them. The woman's letter about the airplane two airplane incidents. Dr. Jensen, who had a fuel starvation issue and ended up in a tree in a backyard, nearly hit the guy who was watering his flowers or garden in the backyard. And the other one in which Mr. Fletcher had to land his airplane starved of fuel on the road, and I was there, he did take out a mailbox and I don't know what else, a few other things. And it was very disturbing to see an airplane parked out on the road. And if I were in your shoes and I lived in one of those houses, that would very much concern me as well. What we did after that event is we had the EAA, the Experimental Aircraft Association, assist us, and we ran a bunch of exercises where we raised the traffic pattern altitude from the 800 feet above the ground, which is what was recommended at the time, to 1,000 feet. And we found that what it did is it kept the airplanes up a little bit higher and a little farther from the houses. That was a good thing. The other thing that we did is when we reconstructed the runway, it shifted 6 degrees away from the houses. And that had an effect. Not a huge effect. It's not like moving the runway across town, but it had an effect on where the airplanes were. And so it seemed like for a while, things were going well. We were recommending to pilots that they enter the traffic pattern at 1,000 feet above the ground. And the fact that we had moved the runway slightly had moved the traffic pattern slightly. But it sounds like from your complaint that there's been a recurrence. And, I guess part of it doesn't surprise me. The people out there change. Memories are sometimes short. And so, just speaking from my standpoint as the council, I think the strongest thing that we can do, because we can't penalize them for where they fly in the air. The strongest thing we can do is have our airport manager talk to them. And the best thing you can do is tell us when you see that recurrence so he can go out and talk to them. And then if we can't see any kind of change in behavior as a result of that, the only real hammer out there is with the FAA. Getting them to swing it is hard. I'll just be candid with you. It's not a panacea. You complain to them, they're not going to come running out to check things out. But if you continually complain to them, they'll get sensitized to it, and then hopefully they'll come out and do an education seminar or do something to the pilots. In a really flagrant violation of pilot behavior, the FAA will find that pilot and take potential enforcement action against them. I just don't see it happening very often, so I don't want you to think that I'm handing you a great remedy. I'm trying to hand you every remedy that I can think of as counsel here, and I'm sorry,
Well,
that's all I got.
the question I have to you is, don't you report this to the FAA?
Report that you have seen airplanes that are too close, that you say are just clipping the telephone poles, but you can't read the numbers. If I told that to the FAA would say, sorry, Steve, I don't believe you.
But no, it's on your record. You've got all this stuff. You can present it to them.
Well,
The reason I'm asking you that is because we did talk to them, and they didn't give us any more assurance than you already have.
I'm sorry, that it's their
We're getting the
jurisdiction.
runaround.
Well,
Steve.
it's their jurisdiction, it's not ours. We don't have the legal ability to do anything about the aircraft when they're in the air. The best thing we can do is recommend approximate positions for the pattern and altitudes.
And that's I think to just reinforce what Council Take has said there is, some of the best things that we have done that are good examples, just to recount them, that are within our ability, is lengthening and realigning the runway, publishing those changes with the higher traffic pattern. How does that work? I just got done mentioning, and you reinforced, Steve, that doesn't have any enforcement ability, regulatory strength. But you know what most pilots do? They come to a place they're not familiar with, and they look at a certain set of resources and information sources to find out what the advised traffic pattern altitude is. And they read that, and they look at that on their GPSs or whatever resources they have, and they typically fly that. So overall, the trending toward doing these things to educate and advise are about the strongest things, as Council Takis says, that we actually have to address this. And we're gonna get to Manager Rowe in a moment, who will speak to some of the things already in progress. I'd like to get some other comment here, Member Stotts, or questions.
Yeah, Mr. Myler, this is kind of a corny expression, but I feel your pain. I have witnessed some pretty egregious actions on the airport myself. I went in the airplane. And if I had the ability to take a hickory switch to those offending pilots, I would gladly do so. It's just, it's hard to point them out. However, I would like to help you with this a little bit. During the World War II, the Defense Department had an air spotter program. They gave all the citizens along the coast, any volunteer who was interested, a card with the shapes of the various kinds of airplanes that the enemies were flying. Well, I could help you. I could give you some pictures that would help you identify the planes. There are some simple characteristics: high wing or low wing, nose wheel or tail wheel, and then of course there's the color. And now with that alone, we can't go to the FAA, but we could snoop around the airport a little bit and perhaps put the fear of God in the offenders. It's not a lot, but it would help. And the more specific you can be about these guys who are doing this, the more it would help us.
I appreciate that. I would ask for an investigation, though, and see if we can get more into that. And even talking with the FAA, too, on our behalf. If we have to go to the FAA, we will. But I'm coming here first because I am an attorney and I understand you have to exhaust administrative remedies. That's why we came here. If we have to go above you, we will do that.
I want to intercept you on this, because you've mentioned that phrase a couple times, and I'm going to turn to our counsel as well to advise us on where is Mr. Myler potentially going with that comment. I'll first ask you that, Mr. Myler. What do you mean by exhausting administrative remedy, then, quote, going above your heads? To whom and to what end? I don't understand where this trajectory is.
If something were to happen and we hadn't complained about it, you would be able to exonerate yourselves from any kind of liability. But
we don't have any kind of liability.
Yes, you would. Yes, you would. Even though you say you don't have any authority over them, you do have the authority for them coming into this area.
That is absolutely untrue. And I've read your comments in detail where you make question about what is your concern, authority, about the security of this community, about the security of this airport. You should ban certain aircraft if they don't have certain equipment, if they are offenders of these, quote, rules that aren't necessarily rules, you should ban them from landing here. That is absolutely illegal. It is actually illegal for us to take any action against federal law, for us to take any action to discriminate against public use of this airport.
Well, I question that too. The reason I question that is because I used to work for Homeland Security. And apparently there is no Homeland Security even involved here, or even knows what goes on.
And that's correct. And there's none required. By the categorization of this airport. I mean, Mr. Myler, I'm not here to argue with you, but we do know the regulations under which this airport operates, and you may not like them, but, we could hand you a copy of the FARs and, it's all right there. I mean, I don't want to be combative. I just want to nip in the bud whatever this concept you're presenting of our liability for the actions of aviators in a mode of operation that's outside of our control.
Well, what I would ask is that you give some kind of an investigation and then say, if you have so many kind of recommendations of how you're going to address this, that would be nice to see it in writing. If all you can do is talk to them, fine. But I would like to see that in writing.
Well, it is in writing. It's called the federal regulations. And remember, Vice Chair Law.
I would ask Council take us a question. Am I correct in the reading of Title 19 that this authority is charged with the maintenance and administration of the ground facilities at this airport?
That's correct.
Are we charged at all with controlling the airspace above the airport?
No, we don't have jurisdiction over the airspace, and I'm a little concerned about Mr. Myler's comment about exhausting administrative remedies. If we had some jurisdiction over the airspace, that might make some sense, but it's kind of like showing up here and saying, well, I got to come here because my real cause of action is at the Justice Court down in Las Vegas, and I want to exhaust my remedies here. They're completely different jurisdictional bodies, and so, yeah, so that's not.
Mr. Myler, I certainly understand your concerns. I live above the airport as you live below it, and I'm not, they don't fly over my house as lowly as they do yours because they're coming over the mountain and they're higher. However, when I was training to become a pilot, I flew in a number of general aviation airports. And I can honestly say that there were pilots at those airports, even when I was using my radio, who would not talk on their radio. And it was very frustrating for me as a pilot because in one situation, I was sitting at one end of the airport, as was on my pilot's guide, telling me which the calm wind runway was, and at the other end was another airplane who was theoretically coming straight at me to take off. There was nothing I could do other than get on the radio, identify myself, call him at the other end of the runway and say, what are your intentions? And he said, well, I'm going to take off. And I said, interestingly enough, so am I. So are you not going to use your radio and let me know what you're doing? And he said, honey, we don't normally use the radios around here unless we need to. There are pilots out there that no matter what you do, they are not going to follow the regulations in the FAR, okay? And as much as I would like to tell you that I would, like to see them punished for that, part of being a pilot is knowing that you are responsible for your own airspace and keeping yourself safe. And I understand what you're saying, but as an authority, our charge, our legal authority and charge, so far as I know, and Council Takis can correct me on this, does not include investigatory purposes.
Certainly not of non-jurisdictional items,
Yes.
But, I keep coming back to, I think it's helpful for us to hear when we've got issues and for us to send people out and talk to them, because we don't want you to have a bad experience near the airport. I mean, we really don't. And, kind of preaching to the choir here because, most everybody here is a pilot, and you'll never see our airplane go flying low over your house. And so, the people that are doing this, the difficulty is identifying them and then getting the FAA to act on it.
But we're not the ones that know who they are.
Well, I guess.
You do.
No, we don't.
They fly into your airport, and you don't know who they are?
We're a public use airport. We have to allow all airplanes to land and take off at our airport. So, it's not like there's a gatekeeper when they come in, they have to check in or anything like that.
That doesn't make me feel secure at all.
Well, it may not, but it is the reality. And, as a Homeland Security guy, you probably are familiar. I don't want to preach to the choir about what the regulations are and when they aren't, in the categories of airports that require different levels of security. And you happen to live next to an uncontrolled general aviation airport, and we have all the security subjected to FAA audits. We had one just quite recently, and we maintain adequate provisions. We actually have a security patrols daily basis this airport, and we're compliant, and I actually feel quite good about the security on the airport. But Manager Rowe has been patiently waiting to share some, I think, very positive and productive things that he's been doing in his duty as the airport manager, some of which I know has updates that have come in direct response to the concerns that you brought up last month. So Manager Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before we get into that, though, I've asked Bill Schroeder to come and address the authority and Mr. Myler. Bill, come on up. Bill is a designated examiner, a member of the FAST team, was FAA safety team. He's not FAA, he's a volunteer. And he does a lot of flight training around the airport. I wanted him to address what they do as practice, especially during engine out procedures and other things. And I would like to have him address the authority, and if you'd listen, please. Bill is a professional. He's been around a long time. Some people call him a master aviator. He's got the certificate to prove it.
I'm an old aviator,
So,
very old
Bill,
aviator.
floor's yours.
Well, welcome, and if you would please sign in, and as you begin, state your name for the record. And
Yeah,
thanks
my
for
name's
being
Bill
here.
Schroeder, FAA designated pilot examiner, FAST team lead representative for the Reno Flight Standards Office, covering Northern Nevada. I share concerns about rogue pilots because we see accidents in our area as a result of rogue pilots. We've had several accidents in the last several weeks from Lake Tahoe to Reno that have resulted in 5 deaths and several injuries. So it's something that we're constantly aware of and trying to do something about it. I think that's where the big problem lies, because again, this separation between the air and the ground is very well defined. I mean, on the ground, you have the responsibilities at the airport, and in the air, the FAA has the responsibilities for enforcement in air operations. And pilots have a responsibility to abide by air regulations. There are a couple of regulations that I'd like to just mention. Number one is 91-119, which is codified federal regulation out of Section 14, which basically states what are the minimum safe altitudes for an aircraft, okay? And what that is, basically anywhere, an altitude allowing, if a power unit fails, an emergency landing without undue hazard to persons or property on the surface. The other one is over congested areas, okay, like we take over downtown Carson City. Over any congested area of a city, town, or settlement, or over any open assembly of persons, an altitude of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a horizontal radius of 2,000 feet of the aircraft. That's our pattern altitude, 1,000 feet AGL. And then other kinds of non-congested areas, an altitude of 500 feet. Okay? Those are sparsely populated areas. So, and the kicker to all of this is that in the section itself, it starts out and it says, basically, except when necessary for takeoff or landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. So takeoff and landing are exceptions to this particular rule, and rightfully so. You have to come down, you have to go up. So I mean, it makes very good sense. And if pilots follow these regulations, we have a safer aviation environment. The other one I wanted to talk about is the advisory circular, okay, 90-66 alpha A. This has to do with recommended standard traffic patterns and practices for airports without an operating control tower. Yeah. And basically, there's 3 areas here that I'd just like to bring to your attention. It says here that it is recommended that airplanes observe 1,000 foot above ground level traffic pattern altitude. Large and turbine-powered aircraft should enter the traffic pattern at an altitude of 1,500 feet AGL or 500 feet above the established pattern altitude. The pilot may vary the size of the traffic pattern depending upon the aircraft's performance characteristics. The next section, the traffic pattern altitude should be maintained until the aircraft is at least a beam the approach end of the runway, the landing runway on the downwind leg. And then the third one here is the base leg turn should commence when the aircraft is at a point approximately 45 degrees relative bearing from the runway threshold. So what we have, and I was on the committee, Steve was on the committee, Steve Takis was on the committee. We were all together, Tim, putting together this traffic pattern that you see up here. Again, it's a recommended traffic pattern. There's really no authority at the commission level to do anything about it. I mean, this is something that pilots take a look at and say, yeah, that makes sense, we'll fly it. And if they do fly it, people will be happier. What we do, and I want to mention this too for the gentleman here, is the fact that there are certain requirements for a pilot certificate that have to be met in order to get that certificate. One of them for all three major certificates, pilot, private pilot, commercial pilot, and certified flight instructor, require that the pilot be able to, with, we refer to it as a simulated engine-out landing, land the aircraft at a specific point on the airport. And they're tested on that. So what you have is an aircraft with an applicant, downwind for the airport. The power is reduced at the point opposite the landing point, and then it's up to them to be able to take the aircraft and get it down to that point and land, as specifications say, within 200 feet of a specified point on the runway. So it takes practice to do that. It's not something that you just go out and do it. So, but it is a requirement that the pilots have to meet in order to receive a pilot certificate. And I know myself as a designated pilot examiner, I'm doing this frequently. The thing that I want to point out, and we're going to talk to pilots about this as well, again, is that when they come down to the 45-degree point where they're going to start to turn their base leg, that they haven't reduced their altitude, 500 feet. They're descending. And what we normally look at is at a point where they turn base to final, and they're about 500 feet above the ground and coming in. The other thing that we're looking at, and in fact we're looking at it at Reno right now, of all things, is the way to keep an aircraft higher as it's coming in on its approach. And how do you do that? Well, we're discussing right now displaced thresholds in order to keep the planes higher as they're coming into the runway. Now, the displaced threshold makes no difference whatsoever for takeoff, but it does stretch the landing path out a bit. Most of the time on the emergency or simulated engine-out procedures, the pilots are being coached by their instructors to land at the touchdown markers. Okay, now this is not right at the numbers, it's 1,000 feet in. So they're higher at that point anyway. So those are the regs. And I know Tim wanted me to come in and just talk about them. And the fact that, there are certain things that we have to do as examiners and as flight instructors to train pilots to be able to perform so they can achieve their pilot certificate. So that's about all I have to say, Tim. Board, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Okay,
Thank you very much for coming tonight and sharing your insight. We very much appreciate it. And thanks for helping all the folks out there be safer. As I think Member Stott said very appropriately, there are people who you'd like to take the hickory switch to, because this is about engendering a sense of security and positivity, in the community, and an understanding of, safe airmanship. And I think all of us who are pilots are particularly invested in making aviation safer because we have to fly with these folks as well. But I want to caution, and some of the firmness of my tone is really in the area of assuring you and being very clear what is and what is not within our jurisdiction and what we can and what we cannot do. Now, having said that, obviously, we want people to be safe. Now, it's important, though, that, and as we were just listening, we understand what, has been labeled on a couple occasions here as quote, rogue pilots, okay? And I think the implication there is folks who are potentially daredeviling or flagrantly acting in some way that is patently unsafe. And I think it's really important to understand, we're not going to be able to make that assessment any better sitting here than you can looking up in the air from your backyard. But, it's impossible to understand from what you've presented whether anyone is actually doing anything that even the FAA would regard as reckless operation. So some of the things I think, but while it's still fresh in my head before I turn back to Manager Rowe, that I would ask you to think about, and if you don't know it, in your mind right now and pay attention to, is what direction are these aircraft heading as they come over your head? Because based on where your residences are relative to the runway, one has to think about, you can actually discern, are we talking about a practiced engine out maneuver? Are we talking about someone who's on downwind? Are we talking about someone who's doing some crazy cranking and banking maneuver? Because to be honest with you, they wouldn't be heading, for example, in a turn north to turn through east to north to west and touch down on the runway. At that point, i.e. west of the end of runway 27, for any normal reason, unless it was a practiced engine out maneuver. So, I mean, not to be, to drive into this, but I think it's important to understand, as much, as what kind of airplane it is and is there a particular, end number, is what direction are they heading, what are they doing, and so forth. Now, from your description, before I hand over to Manager Rowe, you mentioned a couple things that do lead me to believe, from what I've heard, that what you may have observed in a couple cases is indeed engine out practice, because you mentioned two things. One, I believe, I think it was last month, that the aircraft was in a turn or a bank of some sort, and two, that it sounded that the engine wasn't running, which it almost assuredly was, but perhaps pulled to idle again to simulate, as was just presented, an engine out simulation. So these aren't necessarily, I guess I want to stress, operations that are illegal or reckless or even really dangerous outside the general confines of operation of light aircraft. But Manager Rowe, I know you've got, and thank you for bringing our guest, some other feedback and comments about what you are doing within your power and the authority's power to address some of these concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Myler, just real quick, I'm a professional pilot. I've been flying for 45 plus years, and I've always prided myself on being professional. And I have witnessed a few things at the airport that I had to say something. One morning, an airplane doing flight training came over right over the top of my terminal. Scared the heck out of me. I had a chat with that gentleman. He's not done it since. Bill Schroeder, he just walked out. I hope he's not leaving, but he had an incident probably a couple of years ago, a near midair, by somebody coming into the airport who was not using their radio. Well, a lot of these things over the last 5 years we've tried to correct. We can't force someone to use their radio, but we can educate. We, with Bill's help, with the Flight Standards District Office in Reno, their help, we have had what we call safety seminars with the FAA safety team. They've been conducted at our airport. We're going to have another one hopefully by the end of the year. And we've had them in Minden, and they're conducted in Reno. And this is all to educate pilots to do the right thing. The FAA has no rule, like we've been talking about, to use a radio in an uncontrolled airport. That's a point of contention that I have with the FAA. That should be a rule. Unfortunately, it isn't. So we put out the word to transient pilots, please use the radio. It's safety. Let's get everybody on the same page. And term I've used before. Some of these guys are probably getting tired of me using it. The last thing we want to see is our airplane parts falling in somebody's backyard, especially in yours. I encourage you to call me whenever you see a problem. Even if I'm in the office, you give me a color of an airplane to type. If I see that airplane, I'll say something. Because I want to be a good neighbor to the folks on Apollo and Bowers. And I don't want to see any airplane parts falling in your backyards. So anytime you need me to just give you that, I can. Now, there's going to be times I'm going to be blunt with you, that I can't do it, that there's nothing I can do. As long as they are adhering to the FARs, then there's not much I can do. All I can do is say, hey, please be a good neighbor. But I will work with you and your neighbors to try to make this a safer environment. I promise you that.
I appreciate that. I guess the problem I'm having wrapping around my head, wrapping around the idea that we are regulated so much when we drive a car. You have all these things that you have to do, but up in the air, you don't have the same thing. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah,
because
we have regulations that we don't, there's so many regulations that we are held under. We get used to them. We don't quote them, but we know they're there. There are some things that we know that we cannot do. For instance, if we're converging with another aircraft, and at night, we see a certain color light, we have to change directions. We know how to do that. We couldn't quote the regulation, but we know that's what we're supposed to do to avoid bumping into somebody. But yeah, if you ever get into a book called the Federal Aviation Regulations and the Airman's Information Manual, it's that thick.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it's not a lot of fun to have to read, especially when you're learning to fly.
Neither is the Code of Federal Regulations in anything. I do have one question for him, if I may. What happens at nighttime if they're coming in way late at night? Is there anybody that even knows that they're there and have left or stayed or whatever?
No, it's uncontrolled at night. We have no really businesses that are open that late. Usually the people that come in that late are tenants. We do have what's called pilot control lighting at the airport. So by keying their mic, they turn the lights on automatically. They stay on for 15 minutes and go out. If they're not using the radio, the lights won't come on.
Whatever you can do for me would be very nice. I appreciate what you've been doing, but like I said, I'm still don't feel secure. I don't particularly want to have to move out of the area just because federal regulations don't help us a lot. I don't want to have to do that because I've lived here for 26 years. But anything you can provide for us in the way of a little paper or some kind of investigation you're going to do or whatever you're going to be doing, I'd appreciate seeing it. Because I don't want to have to come back here 10 years again and say it's happening again. I think it's frustrating.
Vice Chair Law.
I do sympathize with what's going on. I truly do. I'm a very organized person when it comes to reporting things. If I were in your position, I would make myself a little form that said date, time, color of the airplane, description of the airplane, and bring it over and give it to him so that he can look around and see if it recurs and comes back time after time after time with the same description. That gives us something to work on. But when you say it's a white plane without telling us if it's a tail dragger or it's even a twin engine airplane or a single engine airplane that's got high wings or low wings. There are so many white airplanes today that it's almost impossible to go beat on somebody if you don't have at least a date and time and some idea of what the airplane looked like. And if I were in your position, I would make myself a whole tablet of them. And I'd be on him every time I had one. I'd fax it over to him.
I have a tablet like that, but it would help to have what you have suggested to give to me so that I can identify the airplanes, because about the only thing we lay people know is what color they are and if they're striped.
The other thing I might add is there are rules for flying an airplane, just like there are for driving a car. And as you well know, on College Parkway, not long ago, a car went through and hit one of the hangars. I don't know how many fences I've seen in this town down and buildings run into and big holes gaping in the sides of houses, but it seems not to be just the airplanes that are doing crazy, crazy things. The problem is when you're in the air, people don't always get to catch you. When you run into a building, you usually stay there.
Well, I just wish there were some kind of penalties. That's the problem.
We don't have that authority.
Treasurer White?
So at last month's meeting, we gave Manager Rowe direction to start working on creating a place on the website that he could direct people to inform them how to make complaints to the FAA, and so that people with concerns could get the same consistent story. So I'm just wondering where you're at with that.
I don't recall giving that direction.
I do recall, Member White, we talked about Manager Rowe speaking with the flight instruction providers on the airport to give them some direction. Before we, not to cut this off, but I would want you to mention that before we're done here tonight, about some of their activity, but I am not sure I recall what you just mentioned, but this sounds like potentially an idea, so.
Well, if you all don't remember it, that's fine, but I think we should move forward with that. So would we make that in a motion?
Could you just,
or
could you just clarify that again, since for those who don't recall it or didn't hear that, just flesh that out a little bit?
Well, I think it would be helpful if we had a place on the website with some direction as to how a resident would make a complaint to the FAA and some general roadmap, if you will, to what sort of regulations that the airplanes have to follow if there's a concern in regards to low flying or being out of the recommended pattern and that sort of thing.
Vice Chair Lau?
Are you suggesting that we put a form on the website where they could have a reporting form that would be consistent, that would be forwarded, or?
No.
Okay.
Directing people to where they could very simply and quickly find within the FAA regulations how they go about reporting a complaint to the appropriate authority.
I think the easiest way to do that is just provide the Reno Flight Standards District Office number. Any number of inspectors can take that information down. As far as a form is concerned, I know of no form.
Yeah, there's
I'm not suggesting a form.
Yeah, I think providing that information is good and is helpful because it does give folks an understanding of where they can go to speak to someone who does have that jurisdiction. I certainly would not want that to be interpreted by anybody as, not that it necessarily would, that the airport is saying, don't come to us with your concerns about what goes on at this airport, because that's not the message we'd want to send at all. I fully agree that the conversation we're having tonight is very healthy, and I certainly want Mr. Myler to come away recognizing that, as it was said, this is a good thing. This is exactly the thing you should be doing. And Mr. Rowe is the guy who's at the point of that spear when it comes to hearing those comments and concerns and providing that information, which he has done and I'm sure will continue to do as we have to go to the FAA about your airborne concerns. I don't think it rules out what Treasurer White is saying, though, either. If we can put helpful information up on the website that's useful, that's good.
And just for you, Mr. Myler, I would suggest keeping handy a high-resolution camera with a pretty healthy digital zoom that may help you catch the tail numbers on these airplanes, as well as help the manager identify who that plane might be. It's not hard to do. I carry a camera almost continuously.
Thank you.
Member Stotts? I finally get it right.
Yes, and I almost changed my mind. Yeah, Mr. Myler's complaints are, totally legitimate. But the thing about calling up the FAA, there used to be a guy who lived out in the far west of town who complained every time a Southwest jet went overhead. So that kind of ruined the credibility of people like Mr. Mylar, who comes forward, with a legitimate complaint. So if we put a number or some sort of a contact form or whatever on a website, it might be getting hits from people up there in the fancy part of town who have no complaints at all when you come right down to it.
Whatever you can do would be helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming tonight. I hope that what we've shared, Tim, did you want to make comment as to what you have done to follow up with the flight instruction providers?
I talked with Brian Val and the chief flight instructor at Carson Aviation Academy and a couple of other private flight instructors that roam around the airport regarding your complaint, and told them, let's do things the right way. If you're guilty of this, stop it. Let's come up with a different practice. I was assured that is not their practice. To say we have several people from other outlying airports that do come to our airport to do some flight training. It could have been one of them. I just don't know. But I think if we get your neighbors keeping an eye out, when you see what you consider an infraction, I'll consider an infraction, and I will have a chat with those folks. And if it turns out that they are actually committing a violation, I'll get on the phone to the FAA.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to reinforce what Manager Rose said, guilty is not a term I would necessarily use here, Tim, because they're, as you just said in the end, not necessarily doing anything that is a violation of the FARs. But one of the things that Manager Rowe did ask of our flight training providers, at least those who operate frequently and really are based here on the field, is, if you can practice that engine out, not to say that you can't do it here, not to say that it might not be an important part of their training curriculum to do that here, if that's where that pilot might be basing their airplane, but generally to think about, boy, you could probably do that off the south end of Minden Airport where you're over the alfalfa fields, and it might be less concerning to the people who don't live underneath the traffic pattern. If you get where we're going, trying to just shape an awareness that might not natively be there. You look down and you see rooftops, that's just a different color of ground. You're concerned with what's in the air and not hitting anything on the ground, whether it's a house or a field. But that's obviously a very different perspective than when you're standing outside your house looking up. So, again, it is about education, and we are trying to shape the behaviors, not because we have formal power or authority to do so, but because we have, social influence, and people genuinely, are doing, if they're doing these things and they're not aware that they're disruptive, when they learn that they are disruptive, they stop doing these things and they change their patterns. I think, as was said early in this conversation, it's a transient population, and you have to refresh a new group of people as the populace changes. And we're only aware of the need to do that when you come and present this as you've done. So I hope that as we go forward, you will see improvement and a reduced number of concerns. But if you don't, keep speaking to Tim. If you see things that concern you, point them out to Tim, and as I think you've gotten a lot of hints here tonight, there's some things that you can do that will help us identify problem neighbors who either just need to be made aware or, in the worst cases, potentially, have action pursued by the FAA. So you're doing the right thing, and I hope that you'll see an improvement. And
thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay? All right. Our next item is item number 5 for possible action. No. Is that right? No. For item number 4 on the Well, it's the printed 3, it's now R4.
Yes.
For possible action to approve transfer of Class 2 FBO status of Carson Aviation Services LLC, located at 2640 College Parkway at the Carson City Airport, to conduct its aircraft maintenance and avionics business from its current owner, Steve Posick, to new owner, Betty Creek. So a transfer of the Class 2 FBO license, for lack of a better word. At this point, I think Mr. Posick will need to recuse himself, and he is stepping down from the dais at this time, as he has an interest in this. And as he's doing so, we'll recall that last month we were potentially going to look at this matter, but there were a couple of helpful comments that we gave to Ms. Creeks. Welcome. That hopefully, or we knew, would smooth this through, and I appreciate your taking the time to address those, and the conversation you had with Council Takis, and welcome back tonight. And let's see. Is the best way to start this, Council Takis? I think we had a couple of specific things we were looking for information on. It was providing more detail on the financial statements and on the insurance. Is that correct? But maybe you can say that officially.
That's correct. There were 2 items. One was some financial showing of the applicants, not of the business they're buying. And from the revised application that's submitted, I see that Mrs. Creeks has supplied a bank statement, and she's redacted the personal information, which was our suggestion to her, because these matters become a matter of public record, and we don't really want her banking information spread around. But she's taken care of that issue. And then the other issue was to correct the additional insured listings on the insurance. It said Carson City Authority instead of Airport Authority. And it also needs to list Carson City. I didn't check. I'm not seeing that. I am seeing certificate holders, Carson City Airport Authority, so it looks like that's been corrected. It should also list Carson City as an additional insured. That's what the regulations required, so.
And is that city?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, and Mr. Rose just pointed out to me. They're both shown now. It's in smaller print, but it's right above Carson City Airport Authority. So it looks like those 2 deficiencies have been corrected.
Thank you for that. And since you may be answering a question, when you do, if we have some particular questions, just remember to say your name for the record and sign in on our sheet. I feel like that's like the most important thing I say here. So if you just verified that the correction to, I believe, both those named insureds and the addresses, I believe, were corrected? Okay. The question that I had, and thank you, Betty, for providing the additional information on the financials that we were looking for, I had just one question, and in reviewing that, and it showed a gross revenue estimation for the 6 months going forward, and it seemed to be substantially higher than the 6-month revenue of the business up to this point this year. And I was just curious if there was something, I guess I asked this in the spirit of, is there any new type of business or major uptick that you foresee in the scope of business that you're doing going forward compared to what was done previously?
Customer service basically is what we try to do the best. Is these numbers shows exactly what is we've been doing from the month of 1 month already, from the August 8th to September 7th. So this is the numbers basically on the general ledger that we have so far. So.
Oh, the August 4th through September 12th profit and loss?
Yes.
Okay. So the one question I guess that I had there, and it's really the only one that I do have, is where is your labor cost in there?
The labor cost?
For your employees, payroll.
It's 114,000, is that what you're,
That is on the projected statement going forward. I was referring to the profit and loss statement that was submitted for August through September. It was one of the questions I had last month. I see a total income, a top line, and some cost of goods sold and expenses, but I don't see any payroll.
it's two different reports. One is from the profit and loss, and the other one is in the projected statement, is when we don't have that on QuickBooks. That's what is not showing.
You don't have your payroll in your accounting system?
No, we're doing it with different company, with the bank, so that's what I just took it from the bank information on the general ledger. That was the question?
Well, I don't know if I'm looking at the wrong thing here. I'm looking at a profit and loss statement for August through September for Carson Aviation Services. Regardless of whether you use a payroll firm, whether you use anything else, there should be a line here that actually covers those dollars. I see a total income of $57,419, total expenses of $54,113. What I don't see, I see expenses of $2,200 for a net income of $54,113. Okay, but where are the employees? Where's the labor? Where's the payroll cost, regardless if they were paid through an agency or anything else? I show a net income of something very shy, just a hair shy, $2,000 shy of your top line revenue.
Okay. I reflect that on the general ledger. That's what I did in the, the 6 months. I didn't put it in the profit and loss. I don't know if you want me to do that too.
Well, I think this is less probably a matter for us tonight, and I'm not trying to turn it into one. I see your projections as you go forward that you would have a 6-month payroll of $114,000. Okay, that's 20 grand a month. I'm just curious as to why you seem to have no payroll at the moment. And it's maybe more of just a comment about, from an overall health of business type of thing. I think we do have a responsibility. That's what we're doing here, is to review that. So that's why I asked the question as to why that's not in your accounting. Vice Chair Law.
If you take the $114,000 that you've put on your projection for 6 months and you divide it by 6, you get $19,000 per month in payroll expense.
That is correct.
Okay. Is that your gross payroll, or is that your payroll plus all the benefits and everything else that you pay out to the payroll company every month, including the burden, which is usually, that's your Social Security, your withholding, all of that stuff included, plus health insurance and so on and so forth. So are you telling us that what you are paying to the payroll company every month is about $19,000?
That is correct.
Okay, so that would mean that instead of making $53,000, you would be making $34,000 net profit after payroll. And if you took that amount and multiplied it by 6, then you would have what your bottom line should be for the whole 6-month period. And I can see where you've done that in effect on your projected statement, but it's certainly not reflected on your profit and loss. And your profit and loss should be your bottom line, your income less your total expenses, which is certainly including your payroll, okay, and the expenses related to your payroll, to get to the bottom line. And in this case, instead of $53,000, it would be $34,000. Okay.
That's one of the on the general ledger. At the bottom is $44,670, but it's projected monthly. That's what I try to project, and that show in the general ledger on the bottom of the.
But if you go by generally accepted accounting procedures, okay, your profit and loss should include all of your costs of doing business, and that certainly includes your payroll. So you need, not necessarily on this document, because we've just discussed it, but when you set up a profit and loss, it needs to include all of those figures. Your general ledger is an overall reflection of everything that you do. A profit and loss only includes those items which, as you've shown here, are your income less your operational costs for a bottom line profit. And that can't be accurately reflected unless every expense in your general ledger is reflected on that document.
Okay.
Any other questions from Ms. Creeks on the application? Okay, hearing none, we'd stand in need of a motion. Oh. Member Law?
In light of the shortcomings in the income statement, I would move that the authority approve the transfer of the Class 2 FBO license for Carson Aviation Services from Steve Posix to Betty Creeks.
Second.
So moved by Member Law, second by Member Stotts. Any further discussion from the authority?
Yeah.
Vice Chair Law.
I would hope that you are successful.
Thank you very
And
much.
I also would hope that you will provide some information to those of us who are interested on a monthly basis to see how you're coming along.
I will, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments from the public? Okay. Call for the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, if there be any. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously, and the transfer of Class 2 FBO status is approved, and congratulations. And
Thank you very much.
welcome to
Thank you.
the airport, and we wish you every success.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 5, the real 5, for possible action to approve task number 6 with Atkins to perform an airport master plan update at the Carson City Airport, Engineer Clegg. And I will note that Member Posik has returned to the dais.
Okay, this is an action item. In my engineer's report, I have attached task number 6, which is a task order under our master agreement. And basically, the task includes the scope of work, very detailed, by the way, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing unless you want me to. It's many pages long, and then at the end of the task is a summary of how the fee was arrived at. So basically, we're teaming with Kaufman Associates. Atkins is going to do mainly the drawings, and Kaufman would be doing the bulk of the written report. The planning services will be performed for a lump sum amount of $440,000. The FAA share is $412,500, and the Airport Authority's share is $27,500. So once this gets approved, the next step is to get an independent fee estimate from another planning firm, and that's to have them take the same scope of work, and what they do is they determine what their fee would be, and that is shown to the FAA to, and the airport, for that matter, to just verify that our fee and scope is fair and reasonable. So I actually have finally got a quote from a firm that's willing to do that. I don't know if that can be included with this action, but, well, first off, I would recommend that you approve task number 6 with Atkins to prepare the airport master plan update at the Carson City Airport, but that would be contingent on FAA approval and funding, so that we don't move forward without enough funds for the airport to even get it accomplished.
Council
If I could just jump in really quickly, I just want to let you know I've reviewed task 6, and I think it's appropriate. It refers to master plan update, but if you actually read the context, it's actually a new master plan for Carson City. And it is necessary that we do this. We're at the end of the lifespan of our old master plan. In fact, we've accomplished most of the items that were in the old master plan, so it doesn't provide much of a roadmap for us for the future. I don't think you need to take any special action on getting the independent pricing. It's within the description of task number 6, so I think if you approve task number 6, you're also authorizing the airport engineer to go seek that independent, whatever they call it, independent fee estimate. Yeah.
And that firm is called TKDA. That's not part of the fee, though. Their fee is a separate fee for $4,000 to develop the cost.
I misunderstood. I thought that was included in the fees here. So if it's not included in the fees, then you probably have to take separate action. You're not noticed to do it on this agenda.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. I didn't know what Tim's limit was for approving costs.
For anything like this, any expenditure really is like this for $4,000 for this type of issue will have to be agendized.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, let's be accurate, for items that are not budgeted items, otherwise budgeted. It's not really a dollar amount thing. It could be, there's a maintenance budget for $100,000 in the airport, and Tim's going to spend $80,000 of it technically to be within the budget. I don't think you'd do that without probably secondary authority approval. But
okay.
So the piece that is not included in task 6, let me understand, is the fee for the
independent fee estimate, and well, we'll just have that as an agenda item at the next meeting. Sure. So let's just concentrate on task number 6 with Atkins.
Okay, questions for Mr. Clegg, Vice Chair Law.
Jim, this task 6 is in the budget?
No, I don't believe it is. But
because we were talking about the $4,000, all of a sudden I'm going, wait a minute, is this? And I'm looking through the budget and I'm not seeing it, so okay.
No, I didn't mean to add confusion there. No, it's certainly not in the airport budget, though it is in the ACIP planner.
Yeah, so it's always been planned, but yeah.
When are we talking about starting this?
Well, what's interesting is that planning grants typically come sooner than construction grants. I don't know why. Maybe the FAA planners are more efficient than their engineers. But I noticed that the Elko Airport, they got their planning grant this year in January. They were the first airport to get a grant from the FAA in the state. So So my understanding is that we could immediately after meeting with FAA and getting concurrence of the cost and the scope, that we could immediately submit a grant application and could possibly start as early as January.
Okay.
But it's really contingent on their grant cycle.
And is it correct that this is the only item, as I look at the ACIP, Mr. Clegg, this is the only scheduled project for 2017?
That's correct.
Okay. So it stands to reason that this will be a light year budgetarily when it comes to FAA matching grants. And I would turn to our treasurer and ask, is there any reason why, if this kicked off as early as, right away, but realistically somewhere near the end of this year, that we would have a cash flow issue with regard to the approximately $30,000 local share?
Oh, I think we'll be in pretty good shape as long as we can fall on the rock sword.
Okay, so to frame this, we would need a motion.
Okay, I'll do it. I move to approve task number 6 with Atkins North America to prepare the airport master plan update at the Carson City Airport, contingent on FAA approval and funding.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Member Posick, second by Member Stotts. Further discussion from the authority. Any public comment on this matter? Okay, hearing none. Any final questions or comment from the authority? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, if there be any? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. And Mr. Clegg, then you will also remind us to agendize the additional piece for the, we'll get this right, IFE.
Yeah,
For
that's a
next
good
time
one.
around.
Yes.
Okay. And then takes us to our final action item, number 6, for possible action on items related to the Carson City Airport project for North Apron rehabilitation, monthly status reports, potential change orders, and so forth. And so knowing that we would be covering this subject in the engineer's report, do we have anything that needs action tonight related to the project?
No, this is simply an informational one tonight.
Okay, so in that case, we will not really take action here because there's no action to be taken, and we'll just get item G in your non-action item engineer's report. So there is no action required on item 6, and we will move on to item G, the airport engineer's report, Mr. Clegg.
Right. So in my engineer's report, I did give a summary of where we stand with the North Apron. And in that engineer's report, I also gave an exhibit showing what phases are involved. We've paved phase 1 and 2. Phase 3 is currently under construction. They'll be paving that next week. So they're ahead of schedule. In fact, I think they're going to end up being, overall, if things go as they're going, they're going to be done 3 weeks to, or even more ahead of schedule. But we've had a few bumps in the road. During phase 1 and 2, there was a water line that went to the shade tree hangar, and it became more extensive than we anticipated. Because of that, there was additional water line removed and replaced, and the additional cost is approximately $3,300. During phase 3, we discovered a snafu with underground pipe that which was just an unforeseen condition. We thought it was an 18-inch pipe, and it was for about 16 feet, and the remainder of it was a 15-inch pipe. So it was flowing from a larger pipe to a smaller pipe, and so we had them remove and replace that. That cost is approximately $5,000 extra. We do have a reduction in cost coming up, though, and what that is we were planning to put in 2 concrete pads for jet parking and helicopter parking. Unfortunately, the FAA has changed their testing requirements for concrete, and there is no concrete available in northern Nevada that meets the FAA requirements, and therefore, we've decided to use a stronger asphalt mix and put a sealer over the top of that to make it fuel resistant. Anyway, because we're eliminating the concrete, there's a credit of about $150,000. But then when you add in this extra asphalt and the seal that I'm thinking of putting on, and with the water line and that storm drain and some other minor add-ons, we're still getting a credit of around $50,000. So we're way under budget and way ahead of schedule. So things are going really well. Now, I did include in my report some pictures if you are interested in what it looks like as they build it. So next month, we'll bring another report, and we'll have a better grasp of where we actually stand financially. So any questions on that?
Questions for Mr. Clegg? Member Law?
I just wanted to make a comment. Chairman Hutter and I have attended most of the construction meetings, and I have been really pleased with the professionalism and the creativity of the crew that is participating in those. Granite and the testing companies have been prepared and forthcoming on all of their, and Tim has been there as well, and sometimes Gary, on all of the where they are and what their plans are, and their timeframes have been rational and achievable, and obviously that's why they're ahead of schedule.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, and also note that that compliment extends across the board. Jim and Jim's colleague Brian Fitzgerald from the Atkins side, and Brian really, I think, chairs those meetings. And when I watch him work, and I think really kind of his counterpart Bobby over on the Granite side, it's very pro. I take a lot of notes about, how we can spruce things up over on my side of the ramp when it comes to meeting functions. So, great job all around, and really appreciate what you guys are making happen. And the results show up. We've foreseen the problems and headed them off with, as you said very well, Linda, creative solutions. So,
I failed to mention another problem that happened during the air races. We had some airplanes that were parked on the new ramp, and there was some fuel that was spilled onto the pavement. Now, generally, 100 Lola doesn't really damage pavement real bad, but when it's brand new, it will. But when Jet A gets spilled, it eats up any asphalt, and that's what happened. So we're going to have to do some repairs to the brand new pavement that hasn't even been paid for yet. So that's unfortunate, but it happened. We know what to do, and we're going to get it done.
Treasurer White?
So could that possibly be an insurance claim against the pilot or owner of the plane that created the issue?
I don't have an answer for that. Maybe Steve knows.
You know, honestly, I don't know that. One of the things that happens to airplanes that are sitting on the ramp, our temperature swings in Nevada, because we're desert, go from pretty cool at night to very warm during the day. And if aircraft fill their tanks with fuel, when it gets warm during the day, a certain amount is going to bleed off into the overflow tube, and it's going to end up on the pavement. Some airplanes are more conducive to that than others. My airplane's black. It does it all the time. But it uses 100 low lead, so it doesn't do much damage. The larger airplanes that use Jet A, that can be an issue. I think it's something that's just going to happen. I don't know that you can go back to the pilot or to the FBO and say you did something wrong. But you know, what I had mentioned to the airport engineer earlier. You know, there's got to be something we can do, and one of the things that he's talked about is some kind of sealant that is more resistant to that, and that would probably be a good idea. You know, you don't notice it as much on older pavement. I don't know why that is. Maybe you know why. But, you know, on older pavement, you know, the fuel leaks out or, you know, expands out, I'm sure all the time, and it doesn't seem to create as much of a problem. So.
Well, actually, we visited the self-serve, and it's interesting because they're spilling fuel all the time, but most of it's 100 low lead, so there really isn't a lot of damage. It does discolor the pavement, but it's not real bad. But that Jet A, it just eats up the asphalt, and my understanding was that it was a Citation that got refueled, and I didn't get the end number.
Where's your camera?
Yeah.
You got a picture of it?
And we don't know whether it was a overtemp, overpressure venting.
Right.
Versus, I mean, I will tell you that, yeah, you know, as a Citation operator, I've not seen that happen. But, you know, I guess what I'm not trying to dance around here is there's only one fueler on the field.
Right.
Was this a spill or was this a vent?
And I have no idea.
And that's a really good point, because that would also generate the answer to the liability question. And so if somebody had seen the FBO spill the fuel, then I think there'd be a pretty clear responsibility. And my guess is, knowing Michael Golden, he would probably jump right to it if he had evidence of that. I know he sent emails to me and to the airport manager saying, well, did anybody see anything? And unfortunately, the only thing I think we saw was the damage to the pavement. So.
Do we have an estimate of what the repair cost is going to be for that?
I don't yet. It's well, it's well below what we've got. So, you know, we're talking about maybe $2,000.
Okay, thank you for that scope and scale concept. I missed the construction meeting this week. Okay.
So I do have another item on my engineer's report, and that is the Airport Capital Improvement Program. We made a couple of changes to it. One thing that I did was I added $30,000 to the cost of the master plan to compensate the airport for the manager and Steve Takis to attend public meetings, and also to offset the cost of this independent fee estimate that I'll be bringing forward to the airport authority next month. We also added a project to acquire the property to the west of the airport. It used to be the Langston property, and that was put in the year 2022, which is our wish list of items. You know, it's not a high priority project, but it's something that we ought to keep our eyes open for if it becomes available, which it is right now, and that's probably why.
To interject, if you recall, this is the property off of the west end of the airport, off of 9, where we have in this room had the opportunity to see, at least in my time, 2 ideas for developing that land, and you know, I think we were able to provide some feedback. So as Mr. Clegg's saying, one thing to contemplate is if you know, if we have safety concerns about construction in that area, it may be worth our looking at trying to get FAA funding to acquire that land and keep it airport compatible.
So the last I heard from the FAA is that they plan to hold meetings with the airport staff either in October or November this year. And in fact, an item that I didn't list in here is that Linda and Carl and I met with the FAA, and that was the director of the Western Pacific region, which is pretty high up, as well as the airport. The airport's district office manager. So the first thing he asked is, what can we do for you? So we're from the government and we're here to help. So it was a very good meeting. I think they're really pleased with what the airport can do for them, because we can help spend their money and show that they're doing something to Congress. And but there was a lot of good feedback, a lot of good discussion during that meeting. So anyway, I expect that during that meeting, they said that they'd be sending a letter out soon. And so when you get that, we can start scheduling. And that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time for Mr. Clegg? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to item H, the airport manager's report.
Okay, let's start with the simple stuff. The air race weekend was largely successful. The South Apron was completely full. We had no spare tie-downs available. We fortunately did not have to use the dirt on the north side, but certain larger aircraft used the new apron. Unfortunately, as we discussed, some fuel was spilled. But everything went without a hitch. We sold a lot of gas, and it went very well. And I think that everyone appreciated all the help. I was there on Saturday, guiding a few people out and a few people in, so it largely went very well. The terminal rehab, as from my briefing, is taking shape. It is framed. The main part of the roof, the round area, is being worked because of the building department's requirement. They have to add some structure to it in order to cover the membrane part of the roof. In my briefing, I said that the wiring of the building might be a problem. I got the quote today. It will be on the agenda for next month. the quote came in at $10,000 to bring it into code. So that's just the cost that it was quoted. One of the problems was a large junction box that was located inside the old kitchen, had to be relocated, and actually to quote the electrician, when he opened that box up, he just said, "Oh my, this will never work." So the lighting that is going back in to be replaced will be all LED, so that will over time be a cost savings to the airport. The airport authority last month approved the addition of $3,000 to ensure that the walls in the terminal were filled with grout. They were in fact full and solid. So that was a good thing.
So none of that money was used?
No, none of it was used. And just to keep it simple, that's really all I have, unless there are other questions.
I have one to start. Back to the electrical piece on the terminal, what was it that we did in re-roofing the terminal that triggered code compliance on electrical?
A lot of the electrical conduit went through the roof area. And because when they removed the old roof on the wings, they didn't do anything to the main part of the terminal. That wiring will not be moved, but the wings were the problem. The west wing, the old kitchen area, that was completely gutted. Everything was, it didn't even have structure on it and at all. And so all of that wiring was removed. And of course, if you touch it, you have to replace it and bring that to code. The east wing, my office, really, they didn't have to do anything. But the room next to it, where we had Gary's office, it mostly had to come down because of mold in the drywall above, in the ceiling and in the walls. And because of that, that also caused the wiring to have to come to code and be removed.
Thanks. Treasurer White?
Do the jet fuel sales and gas sales in this month's financials reflect the air race activity?
No, we won't see that till next month.
Vice Chair Law? Oh, that was a hanging Chad. Yeah. Okay, other questions for Mr. Rowe? Thank you very much. I'm glad that we did have a successful, I remember hearing on the AWAS, the urgent plaintive announcement to, seek tie downs elsewhere. So, yeah, I'm glad we got good traffic and we were able to accommodate it with everything going on.
Yeah, I wanted to be diplomatic about that. All I basically said was that there are no tie downs available and to contact Mountain West for alternatives.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, legal counsel's report, Mr. Takis.
I just have three quick things. One is that we have submitted to the Board of Supervisors, and they've approved on first reading the changes to Title 19 regarding the traffic pattern diagram and the over-the-counter permits. Supervisor Bagwell was very helpful in finding a couple of language corrections to the over-the-counter permits that made a lot of sense, and so the Board of Supervisors incorporated those. I included in my briefing. They're not substantive, but they correct the tense issues of the regulation. Second item is
so those were approved?
Yes, they're approved on first reading. They get two readings, right. So they'll be presumably approved on the second reading, and then we'll be good to go. And then the second item is, as both the airport manager and I have reported earlier, the FAA land use audit was completed, but more recently the auditor wrote back to us with additional questions, And the airport manager and I have supplied all the answers, including hopefully one final answer early this morning that I shot back to the auditor. And so I think we should be all set on that. And the third thing is I would just like to personally thank, and I know everybody else would, Carl Hutter and Steve Poskick for so generously volunteering their time and energy and intellect to the Carson City Airport Authority over the last 4 years, and just want to thank you. You don't get a gold watch. I'm sorry, we don't have any. You know what our budget is better than I do. You know that a pat on the back is about all you get. So.
But you're always welcome to come to more meetings and watch if you want to kind of vicariously enjoy it.
Watch. Who's to say we're not going to comment? Request agenda items. Thank you very much, Steve. Any questions for Mr. Dacus? Treasurer White, the Treasurer's report, please.
As of August 1st, we had a beginning balance of $8,056, deposited $71,318. We spent $39,553. We have a balance of $39,821 with an on-hand amount of $779,022. At this point, it's a little preliminary, but I don't see anything alarming in the profit and loss or the balances or any of that nature. So we're good to go.
Any questions for the Treasurer? Okay. Thank you very much. And the revenues that came in were predominantly lease payments? I mean, we're through the property tax side, so
Right.
it's flowage fee and lease payments at this point, right?
Tower leases, all that sort of thing.
Okay. Item K, report from authority members. Member Posick.
I'd just like to thank everybody for the 4 years for putting up through my trials and tribulations. It's been one hell of a learning experience. Thank God I don't have to do this for another 4 years.
Well, thank you, Steve, and I want to wish you the best of luck in your next endeavors, which I know understand some travel and some adventure, and maybe part of that was unlocked right here tonight with the action that we took. So I'm glad that we were able to be helpful in that. I'd like to similarly just say that it has been a real pleasure. I have enjoyed this 4 years that has gone by very quickly, and I guess, Phil, you were, I don't know when you came. When did you come on, Phil?
About 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago. Yeah. So, yeah, it was Steve and myself and Phil, and then everybody has sort of come in since then, and I really have enjoyed this, and I've enjoyed the opportunity to share what I know and hopefully be of assistance. And it's been fun. It's going to be kind of nice maybe to not have to be the chair and moderate the conversation, but I've really appreciated what everybody has done here and brought to these conversations in this important business. The airport is a tremendous asset here in Carson City, and I think really is not just speaking as a pilot and as a user and operator at the airport who obviously cares a lot about its health and success, but I think just as someone who recognizes what the airport can do and continue to do for the growth of Carson City is, it's a special thing, and I appreciate what everybody does here to take their time and be here to be part of shaping that. And I know that there's a lot of work to do in our operational policy and squaring that up, and I appreciate those of you who've taken that on head on to make sure that we are really running a strong ship. And in the business development side of things, always keeping an eye out for opportunities to find new sources of revenue and just strengthen what the airport does here. So while I will be standing down for 4 years, I am sure I will be back if the town will have me at some point, and I look forward to supporting the work you guys do in any way I can. So thanks for the opportunity to chair this group and to be a part of it. Member Law?
This is, his speech was a great segue into today's newspaper article. I already mentioned it to Larry, and I mean, to have the airport mentioned above the fold is not bad. I thought it was a great informational article for people who don't have a lot of contact with the airport, because it talked about where our revenues come from and what we do and how we're related to economic development and so forth. It was an excellent article, and I thank you, Tim, for doing that for us.
And that article was also in the Nevada Weekly magazine.
Good.
Just a few days ago. And I want to give my thanks to Steve and Carl as well. It's been, as Carl said, as Steve said, quite the learning experience. So I think Carl has given some pretty good direction and leadership, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other reports from members, public comment, final opportunity of the night to discuss agenda items if there's any interest or desire, and there is. So we will have a final public comment, and if you'll sign the log and state your name for the record, please.
I'm Michael Greedy. I have an aircraft on the field. I'm here to remind you all to get the damn speed bumps out of there. Thank you.
They're on the list. They should be done hopefully within a week.
Good job, Tim.
Yes, I think we're all looking forward to that, and it was just a matter of waiting for what? The right machine to show up again, right?
Yeah.
And the right personnel, and reminding the right people.
Well, Tim will be on top of that. And any standout agenda items for the next meeting?
The only one that I'd mentioned, I will be bringing to the authority a request for approval for the expenditure of the $10,000 for the electrical.
Okay.
And I've got that one agenda item for the independent fee estimate.
Right.
You might include approval of the revised ACIP, too.
Okay.
I mean, be added to it.
Yeah, the only reason I didn't is we're going to meet with the FAA, and it might get amended again.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Okey doke. Well, that brings us to
An update from the manager in regards to how he's meeting with, update from the manager as to how his meeting with the Melanie Bruchetta goes.
absolutely, and so we'll carry forward. Great point, Member White. We'll hear from that feedback, and then carry forward the item of potential action for the pieces that we didn't act on tonight with regard to the benefits plan. Okay. That brings us to a need for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And we are adjourned.